It's that time of year again, when students and families start thinking about college financial aid. Now, with the redesigned 2024-25 FAFSA, applying for federal student aid has never been easier. The FAFSA is a crucial financial aid application for college students across the United States. It determines your eligibility for grants, scholarships, work-study programs, and federal student loans. Completing the FAFSA accurately and on time is essential to receive the maximum amount of aid. Improvements were made to streamline the application process. Gone are the days of the long, complicated process. The new FAFSA is simpler and more user-friendly. You'll find step-by-step instructions to guide you through each section of the application. By the end of this walkthrough, you will have a clear understanding of how to complete your FAFSA form. So, sit back, relax, and let's get started on this informative and captivating journey through the 2024-2025 FAFSA's new features and updates showcasing the parent section.
Thanks, Misty. So again, like Misty mentioned, my name is Kim Wells, and I'm going to be walking us through the parent portion of RIA Trans application. So you can see here that what I'm showing is the email that the parent that I as Alcina would have received once RIA had identified me in her FAFSA form as the parent that she wanted to send the invite to. So she would have provided my information, including the email address, and like Misty mentioned, once she's selected to send the invite, that happens automatically at that time. So that would send this email invite to me, and then I would hopefully soon at some point look at my email, and this is just a sample of what the email might look like. So it's an email basically explaining that RIA can't be eligible for federal student aid without my input as a contributor, and so I need to help complete her FAFSA form by completing my section. So a couple of things that I'd like to point out about this email are, first of all, there's a big blue login button here. So as Misty mentioned, everybody who is going to be a contributor to a student's FAFSA form will need to have their own FSA ID, username, and password. And so I'll show you in a minute when I select the login button what happens there. But a couple other things that I wanted to point out are a couple of help topics that would be important when the parent gets this email. So the first one is this link here that's right after the don't recognize RIA question. So this would be a help topic where if for some reason, let's say RIA had inadvertently entered the wrong email address or something, and so someone accidentally got the email and they didn't know who RIA was, then by selecting this help topic here, they would be able to get instructions for what they would do in that circumstance. And then the other one that I wanted to draw your attention to is closer to the bottom, and this is a section here where it says can't find RIA's form. And from there, what that would be if someone tried to log in as they were invited. They understand who RIA is, like it's my daughter, I know who she is. I go in and I try to log in, but when I log in, my information isn't tied to RIA's form. And so this help article explains what people should do in that circumstance, how they can get that resolved. And so those are two important things that parents are going to want to be on the lookout for when they get their invite email. So at this point, then I'm going to scroll back up and choose the login button here. So I would select login, and then from here I would provide my username and password, and then I would choose the login button. So this is logging me into studentaid.gov. So once I log in, then I am taken to the My Activity portion of studentaid.gov. And so here we're explaining to the parent that RIA has identified them as a parent on the FAFSA form, and parents are required to provide their financial and demographic information, but that doesn't make them financially responsible for any of the federal loans that the student decides to accept. So we wanted to make sure that parents understand that just by providing their information on the form and being called a contributor does not then obligate them in any financial way for any of the loans that the student accepts. So there's two options here for the parent. There's the accept option and the decline. So if they do select the decline, then we trigger a message that explains why it's a good idea for them to go ahead and accept the invitation, but they do have the option for the decline and to return. So if I choose to go back, then it just takes me back to this page here. And then if I accept if I choose the accept invitation button instead, then it will take me into Raya's form. But first, it's explaining by accepting that invitation that I'm agreeing to share my information on the FAFSA form. So once I select continue from that modal message, then we will start the process of helping Raya complete the FAFSA form. So this first page here is just explaining to the parent that you've entered Raya's form, just giving some information about the fact that we need the parent's information in order for Raya to be eligible for federal student aid, and that of course the parent can save the form and come back to it later. Below that, there are some frequently asked questions that relate to what it means to be a contributor on someone's FAFSA form. So it includes like, why have I been invited? Does it mean I'm responsible to pay? What do I need in order to complete the sections? What happens after I complete them, etc. So the parent can choose these down arrows and they'll see the information that's the answers to those frequently asked questions. So from here, I'll select the continue button, and then it takes me to similar information that you saw when Misty, as the student, did the onboarding screens. So there are similar onboarding screens here with a little bit of differences in terminology and what we're explaining to the parent. So the first is the opportunity for them to understand what the FAFSA form is. The second one just explains about contributors, and it talks to parents or spouse being a contributor, how the invite process happens, and then there's also an opportunity here for parents to select this down button here or down caret here to look at and see what information they may need to complete the form. So once they've had an opportunity to read through that page, they'll continue on to the third page of the onboarding, which just generally explains what they can expect, how long it might take, and a reminder that they need to provide their information, and without their consent, that Raya would not be eligible for federal student aid. Then they select the continue button to get to the last page of the onboarding, where we explain the similar things that we did to the student when the student went through their onboarding, just kind of explaining the processing and what happens next after the student's FAFSA form is processed. At that point, they are ready to start the FAFSA form. So they choose the Start the FAFSA form button, and the first page, you'll see that a lot of these pages for the parent look very similar to the pages that Misty displayed for the student. So in this first section here, the parent has the opportunity to review their information and make sure that it's correct before they move forward. Just like for the parent, this information isn't editable in the form itself. So if any of this information is correct, they would need to change that information in their account settings by selecting the link here. And all of this information is carried forward or carried over from their FSA ID from when they logged into studentaid.gov. So then they'll provide their mailing address, city, state, and zip, and their country here, and then they would select continue. From here, this is where we are capturing the consent for the parent. So there's the summary information at the top, just like we had for the student, and then there's the text below that explains what the consent means, what they are agreeing to by providing consent for their information to be pulled from the IRS, and at the bottom, some frequently asked questions related to the consent process. So in this instance, I'm going to choose to approve and move forward by providing my consent on Raya's FAFSA form. The section that we go into is the parent demographics. So here we ask some questions of the parent that will indicate some of their demographic information. The first thing that we start with is the parent marital status. So here they're going to select the marital status that is applicable for them. So in our case, we know that the parents are married, so we're going to choose the married option here. And this is the one place where it's different. The marital status options are different between the student and the parent. So the parent has this additional option of unmarried and both legal parents living together. In our case, that is not their situation. They are married and not separated, so that's the option that we choose here. And then we choose the continue button. From here, we are collecting the student's the parent's state of legal residence. So I'm going to choose the down arrow here, and I'll just choose California. And then you'll see, just like for the student, then we require the month and the year for the parent when they became a legal resident of that state. So they would fill in that information, and then they would select the continue. And that's it for parent demographics. Pretty easy. For parent finances, we will go on to that section, and this is where then they're going to tell us some additional information about their financial situation. The first question that the parents receive are whether or not that they received any federal benefits in the previous 2 calendar years. So basically here, the parent is going to answer whether or not they received any of these federal benefits, them or anybody in their family, for any of these programs. And they would indicate which ones they had received benefits from, and if none of them applied, then they would choose the none of these apply option. And you can see once I select that option, then all of the other options are grayed out here. They'll choose the continue button from here, and then we ask them about their tax filing status. So on this page, we are asking, because these parents are married, we need to know whether or not the parent filed a joint tax return with their current spouse. So if they indicate yes, then they would move forward. If they indicate no here, then they would also be able to move forward, and that then informs the questions that we would ask for them subsequent to this page. There are 2 other questions that may display on this page for the parent, depending on their circumstances. The other 2 questions that may display here include whether they've filed or will file a Form 1040 or 1040 NR. And depending on their answer to that question, the other question that may display would be whether or not they filed a foreign tax return. So here I'm going to indicate yes, I did file a joint tax return with my current spouse, and I'm going to choose the continue button. At that point then, we are asking if the parent's family size is different from the number of people that were claimed on their 2022 tax return. So there you can see there are 2 options here, yes, and if they answered that, they would continue forward. If they answered no, then there's an opportunity for them to be able to tell us what their family size is. Here, pardon, I said that the wrong way. So if the parent's family size is different, then they get to tell us what their family size is. If their family size is not different, then they don't need to tell us what their family size is because it's not different. So if they answer yes to the family size question, then you can see that they would have an opportunity here to provide us with what their family size is. We'll ask them a question here, and then they would provide us what their family size is. So I'm going to answer no, that the family size is not different, which means it's the same as the number of people that were claimed on my 2022 tax return. And then I would say continue. From here then, we are asking about how many people are in the parent's family will be in college. So the parent would provide their answer here, and then they would choose the continue button. From there, we are asking about some information from the parent's tax return. So you can see that on this page, we are only asking a couple of questions here in this circumstance. So we're asking whether or not the parent received the earned income tax credit. So I'm going to say no here. And then we're asking 2 additional questions. One is the amount of college grants, scholarships, or AmeriCorps benefits reported. as income to the IRS, and then the other is the foreign earned income exclusion. So in this circumstance for these parents, these are the questions that would display here. So I would provide answers to all of these questions, and then I would select the continue button. We have then moved on to assets for the parent. So here you'll see that there is an asset question that's asked of the parent that was not asked of the student, and that is related to the annual child support received. So the parent would answer that question and then also provide the 3 asset questions that are listed here: cash savings and checking, net worth of investments including real estate, and net worth of businesses and investment farms. Once they've answered those questions, then they would choose the continue button, and then there is an opportunity for them to provide information about the other parent. So one thing to note here is this is not inviting the other parent to this FAFSA form. Because these parents are married to each other and they filed a joint tax return with each other, with their current spouse, then we don't need to invite the second parent to the form, but we do need to collect information about the other parent. So they would provide the other parent's first name here and their date of birth and their social security number and email address. Once they have provided all of that, they would choose the continue button, and then they have finished completing all of the questions for the parent section. So here they have an opportunity to review their responses before they sign the form. So they can scroll through here. They can see that the which sections were shared with other contributors. And then once they've reviewed their responses, then they would select the continue button here. At that point, they're going to have the opportunity to sign and complete their own section. So remember, this is the parent, so they've just completed their own parent section. And as you saw, it was, pretty straightforward. So they read all of the terms and conditions, just like the student did, saying that, I agree, I didn't provide any false information, everything is true and correct to my knowledge. And then they would select the checkbox, and then you'll see, different from the student's application or the student's portion of their application, this button says sign and submit. And the reason for that is because at this point, the FAFSA form has all of the required sections complete. So Misty showed you Raya completing her section of the form, and then I, as the parent, received my invite. I went in, I signed in, I affirmed that, to this application, I provided my consent, I answered all of the questions, and so all of the sections that need to be completed on this form have been completed. So the form is actually ready to be bundled together. So Raya's portion that Misty showed you will be bundled together with this portion that I'm showing you, and everything gets submitted to the FAFSA processing system for processing. So I choose sign and submit here, and then what you'll see here is a different version of the confirmation page than what the student would see. So this is an abbreviated version of the confirmation page. The parent doesn't need to see all of the information that the student does. It's the student's application, so the student needs to see more information than what the parent needs to see. So this is just an abbreviated version of the confirmation page that essentially tells the parent, congratulations, the FAFSA form is complete. Here's when it was completed, gives them some general information about what happens next. The student will get a confirmation email version of the confirmation page that has more information. The student, gets notified of the processing of the form, and then the student's schools that they listed on the form will reach out to them, determining their eligibility for federal aid. And then there's a section at the bottom that indicates to the parent that they can go back to their dashboard on studentaid.gov and take a look at the status of the student's application. And at that point, the student's form is complete and it's been submitted for processing, and the application is done. Okay, so you saw the abbreviated version of the confirmation page that the parent would see if they are the one who finishes their section and then submits the form as a whole for processing. So we wanted to make sure that you also saw the student version of the confirmation page because it has more information. The application is the student's application, and the information that's in the application belongs to the student, and so they get a little bit more information on their confirmation page than what the parent would. So this is what the student's version of the confirmation page looks like. So you'll see at the top, it looks similar. Some congratulations, student's name, completion date, just like you saw for the parent's abbreviated version. What you see on the student's version, though, is the data release number here. That's also known as the DRN, and the estimated student aid index. And then you also see information here where if the student meets certain criteria, then we'll tell them that they may be eligible for federal Pell Grant. So none of that information was included on the parent's abbreviated confirmation page. As I scroll down, you'll see that the rest of this looks pretty similar. So we're still telling the student to check their email, that they'll get notification of the processing, and that they'll receive information from their school about what the next steps are and what their estimated eligibility is for federal aid. The student can also track and manage the status of their form by selecting this View Status button, and that would take them back to the dashboard on studentaid.gov where they can view the current status of their FAFSA form. And that concludes the walkthrough of the 2024-25 FAFSA form.
Check out the 2024-2025 FAFSA walkthrough student section. Don't miss out on other informative videos. Subscribe to the channel.